DreAllDay.com.
Tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we are on part 2 of our ongoing mini-series. There's actually going to be 2 mini-series back to back. The first of the 2 is why MAGA is terrible for the United States of America. And we're going into part 2 of this series here. So if you missed part 1, that was yesterday's episode. But before we start, remind you of a couple things. First of all, my text message number down below in the description. Secondly, work on mygame.com. Get on my email list completely for free. Just go over to workonmygame.com, put your email address in, and we got you. And third, workonyourgameuniversity.com. If you want to have me as your direct coach, you want to have me help you step up your accountability, make sure you have clear strategies and systems for what you're doing in your business, especially those of you who are professionals, especially you licensed individuals, those of you who are looking to transition, those of you who are starting businesses, already have businesses, want to take your business and what you're doing to the next level, and you know that you need some professional help in the process. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com, and that's where you can take the next steps to having me as your coach and getting to work on those things. All those links are down below in the description to this episode, by the way. So picking up on where we left off, I don't need to give intro to this because I already gave it to you in yesterday's episode. This is going to be 2 mini-series back to back. I do need to say this as a disclaimer before people lose their minds. And I got to say it on both ends of these 2 mini-series, is that this is me showing off my critical thinking skills by giving you both the positives and the negatives about the presence of MAGA/Donald Trump and anyone else involved with him. I'm going to argue both sides of it. And I started yesterday. We will continue today, and we will complete it tomorrow. Well, actually, we're not going to complete it tomorrow. We're going to complete the negative side tomorrow. And then we're going to go into the positive side the day after that for 3 episodes as well. So let's pick it up on point number 4. Why MAGA is terrible for America. Number 4, MAGA ignores climate change. So there's a couple questions here. First of all, is climate change a real thing? All right, for people who think MAGA is terrible for America, they will insist that climate change is a real thing. And it depends, my answer to the question, just so you understand where I stand, it depends on what kind of climate change you're talking about. Because see, climate change can be used in tricky ways. There are tricky language games that people play with this phrase. So does the climate itself change on a regular basis? The answer is yes, of course it does. The climate changes on a regular basis. Now, here's another question. Does that mean that we need to implement a bunch of new measures, rules, laws, and policies as a response to the scientific reality that the climate does change on a regular basis? My answer to that is no. All right, you don't need to implement a whole bunch of new things just because the climate is always changing. Because again, the climate is always changing. The climate has always changed. It was changing 100 years ago. It was changing 50 years ago. It was changing 20 years ago. And people say, well, it's changing a little bit faster now than it was. When most people say, open quote, climate change, close quote, when they use that phrase, climate change, they're often using both meanings, and they vacillate between each one depending on the convenience and the expediency of the conversation. So someone will say, hey, climate change is real. And let's say I say something like, no, it's not. And they say, you don't believe that the climate changes? See, now they're going to the colloquial of, does the climate generally change? The answer is yes. So let's say I answer yes. So then they'll try to manipulate me into, well, since the climate is always changing and it's changing faster now than it ever has in the past, and that means we need to do something about it, right? The answer is no, wrong. No, we don't. All right, so again, people vacillate between both of these meanings. Does the climate actually change? And does it mean we need to do political climate change things such as laws, bills, new rules, new policies in order to do something about the climate? The problem is men, when I say men, I mean humans, let's just say man, trying to quote unquote do something about the natural path of mother nature is not going to work. Man cannot interfere in the process of mother nature. So if the climate is changing faster now than it ever has in the past, I believe that is an act of a higher being and is not, yes, humans can contribute to it. Yes, they can. And humans could do things that might slow it down. But at the same time, this is a deal that is bigger than anything an individual human is capable of stopping, starting, ending, altering, etc. You can't alter the path of Mother Nature. Whatever Mother Nature is going to do, and that your higher being, whatever you call your higher being, decides to do, it's going to happen. And you can't do anything to manufacture or change it with your mere mortal powers. You don't have enough power. So if a person, for example, will say, how could you not believe in climate change? Because the climate doesn't change. All right, let's say somebody said the climate doesn't change. Once you agree with that, now they'll use that as a toehold to get you to agree to all the new rules and regulations that were allegedly basically making this rapidly changing climate situation occur. And excuse me, I meant to say climate does change. I said does change. If anyone will say to you, okay, how can you not believe in climate change? That means you don't believe that the climate changes. Of course the climate changes. You get anyone to agree to that, then you get them to agree to everything else. And if you're good with your words, then you can rope them into these things. And the whole argument against Donald Trump and MAGA is that they're not strong enough believers in this whole concept of climate change. And people, again, they use it as a toehold to start pushing that we need to do things to slow down this rapidly changing climate situation. I will argue that that's bullshit. The reason that I argue is bullshit is because of what I just mentioned. Man cannot destroy what God has created. God created the heavens and the earth. That's one of the first things it said. I believe it's the first line in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So if God created the heavens and the earth, if God decides to destroy the heavens and the earth, then there's nothing man can do to stop it from happening. And if God decides to preserve the heavens and the earth, there's nothing man can do to counteract that decision. All right? Man does not have the power to do these things. So therefore, man cannot destroy something that it didn't create. All that said, one argument against Donald Trump is that he's not a fan of the political version of climate change, meaning he doesn't want to do the policy stuff that is allegedly going to stem, quote unquote, climate change. And this is what people try to use against him and people who are his supporters. Now, although you can clearly understand that this whole concept of climate change is, depending on who you ask, can be a hoax wrapped up in logic used to emotionally blackmail people. So it's three pieces to it. It's a whole hoax of it. You need to believe in climate change because they want to push certain political agendas, bills, laws, rules, and regulations. They wrap it up in logic because they come with some logical reasonings that would get people to agree with them, because if you have no logic whatsoever, then you can't convince people. And then they use all of that to emotionally blackmail you into agreeing with what they're doing. That's what I believe climate change is about. I believe they did the same thing with COVID. I think they did the same thing with the TSA. They do the same thing with privacy in the United States when it comes to Americans. All of these things are designed the same way. There's some way that you're being fooled, but they use logic to get you to agree with the general points. And then they use emotion to get you to not go back on the thing that you have agreed to, not even knowing what you agreed to until it's too late for you to do anything about it. Moving on to point number 5. Today's topic, once again, is why MAGA is terrible for the United States of America. Number 5, weaker relationships with our international allies. Now, this is an interesting point because I see a lot of people saying this, but their argument doesn't quite make sense to me. And I'm going to tell you why it doesn't make sense to me. This one is actually, the point itself, I actually think is generally true. That Donald Trump and MAGA being in charge of the administration generally leads to, is not just because he's there, but because of the things that he does and the things that he believes in, it generally leads to us having weaker relationships with certain international allies, or people who maybe used to be allies. They cease to be allies, or they're not as strong of an ally simply because Donald Trump is present and because of what Donald Trump believes in and what he decides to do. And again, both sides generally agree with this one. It's just a matter of if you think it's okay or you think it's not okay. See, people who are on the never Trump side, never MAGA side, think that Trump is weakening our alliances with allies international. And people who love Trump think he is weakening our alliances with international other countries. And actually, we agree on this. The question is it good or is it bad? So let's address that and talk about it. I don't think Donald Trump really cares about having a weakened relationship with a country like Mexico or Canada or Denmark. Denmark owns Greenland, so you may have heard Donald Trump floating the idea that the United States was going to annex and take Greenland away from Denmark. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but hey, it might. The point being, I don't think Donald Trump really cares. If we don't have a strong relationship with Mexico or Canada or Denmark, I mean, how is that such a tragedy? I'm just asking, this is an open question. How is that a tragedy? I believe that he knows exactly what he's doing when he riles up these countries and their leaders and their sympathizers with his social media posts, his comments to the media, his threats, and also with his executive orders. His enemies, people who don't like Trump, don't like the fact that we are not staying, quote unquote, friendly with all of these other countries, or at least that's the way it appears on the surface. We know there's always other things going on, but on the surface, it appears we're not trying to be friendly with these countries. My verdict on all of this is who the hell cares about how any of these countries feel about what the United States decides to do when what we are doing is in our personal best interest. One thing that you cannot knock Trump on is that he's been very clear from the very beginning that his whole thing was America first. We're going to put America first. And if that means we are going to weaken or dissolve relationships with other countries where we are helping them more than they're helping us in exchange, then we're going to do it. Donald Trump has been very clear about that from the very beginning. So even if you disagree with it, you can't say he lied to you. He didn't deceive you. He told you exactly what he was going to do, and now he's doing it. That's America first. So these countries, again, we're doing more for them than they are doing for us. What the hell is... And I understand some countries have imports and they bring goods, et cetera, into the United States of America. So there is a symbiotic relationship on some level, but the symbiotic relationship is very far from 50-50 with a lot of countries. We're doing a lot more for them than they're doing for us. None of these countries that Donald Trump has poked in his first few weeks as president in his second run, none of them have the power to defeat the United States in any type of prolonged battle, any kind of battle, whether it's a financial battle, a physical battle, or anything else, a hot war or a cold war. None of these countries have the power to defeat the United States, and they know they can't defeat the United States. Their leaders get on social media and in the media and talk tough to make it seem like they're not being bullied by Donald Trump and that they're going to stand up to him. But the fact of the matter is none of them has the resources to fight if it became a fight. And they all know that, and which is why they end up capitulating to whatever Trump wants anyway, quietly. After they made a whole bunch of noise about not capitulating, they end up capitulating because they have no other choice. The bottom line in conflict between human beings is violence. The lowest common denominator, the final ending point, anytime two human beings cannot agree on something, is there will be violence. The United States has one of the strongest militaries in the world. I think the only two countries that could come close will be China and Russia when it comes to the strength of military. And any other country that's not one of those three that gets into conflict with one of those three really doesn't have any recourse if push comes to shove. Those three countries pretty much can run things how we see fit. Why? Because we got all the power. And the bottom line is violence. I'm not saying that we run things because we necessarily will inflict violence, but those other countries understand that if push comes to shove, we can, and there's not a damn thing they can do about it. This is just the reality of humanity, ladies and gentlemen. This applies amongst human beings the same way it applies amongst countries. Some of you may not like to admit this or think about it too often, but it doesn't mean it's not true. So these countries that Donald Trump has poked, none of them had the power to defeat us in any type of battle, any kind of battle. And being that America tends to be doing a lot more to help these countries than they can do to help us because they don't have the resources to help us the way that we can help them. There's nothing wrong with a person whose whole frame is America first, Donald Trump, to stop doing that. He says, we're doing so much for this country. They're not doing much for us. You know, we're not dealing with them anymore. We're not going to help them out anymore unless they do A, B, C. And he's kind of extorting them to do certain things. But the only reason that it looks or feels like extortion is because, as Thomas Sowell said, paraphrasing, when people are used to preferential treatment, treating them fairly seems like you're doing them a disservice. Seems like it's some type of tragedy. It's not a tragedy. If you are used to receiving 90% of the benefit in a relationship, and then the person in the relationship comes to you and says, you know what, I don't want it to be 90-10 anymore. I want it to be 50-50. It feels like they are violating you and doing something wrong to you when they're actually just treating you fairly as opposed to giving you preferential treatment. And that's what Donald Trump is doing with a lot of these countries. His whole thing is America first, and he is putting America first. He is perfectly on brand. He's doing exactly what he said he would do. So if you think it's a bad thing, then you probably were never a fan of Donald Trump, and that's why I put this in a list of the reason why MAGA is terrible for America. But logically, it's not bad. But again, you understand what my frame is for this series. Point number 6. Today's topic, once again, is why MAGA is terrible for the United States of America. Number 6. Halted criminal justice reform. Halted criminal justice reform. That means they're stopping it. I did an entire episode on the concept of criminal justice reform, and I will tell you the cliff notes of that episode. Let me tell you what episode that was. That was episode number 2792. I'm not a fan of the concept of criminal justice reform for one specific reason. That why do we as a people get so excited and engaged in making sure that criminals or suspected criminals get a certain amount of justice? Or let's just say criminals. Forget about the suspected ones. Let's say criminals, people who have been convicted of crimes. Why are we so concerned with how much justice they get? And there's no such thing as any kind of justice for the victims. I never heard of victim justice. Is there such thing as victim justice? So if you go to jail for robbery, what kind of justice does the person you robbed get? You go to jail for murder. What's the type of justice does the person who got murdered or their family, what do they get? I don't hear anybody advocating for the victims, but everybody's advocating for the criminal. That doesn't make any sense to me. The criminal was the one in the wrong. How about the person who they did wrong to? How about they get some justice? Why is there no movement for justice for the person who was victimized by the criminal? I'm just asking. This is an open question. I'm asking. Anybody has an answer, get in touch with me. I'm not a fan of criminal justice reform because, again, the reform for a criminal, we already got that. It's called the incarceration system. Now, is the system great? No, it's not. I have made it very clear to all of you. If you do not have financial resources, stay out of the criminal justice system in any way, shape, or form. Don't end up in a court case. Do not get accused of a crime, and damn sure don't go to jail if you don't have financial resources. Why? Because you're probably going to end up incarcerated and with things on your record that you can't get off that's going to affect the rest of your life in a negative way. The justice system in America is not based on justice, it's based on finances. If you don't have them, stay out of the system. I made that very clear many times over the years. With that being said, if you end up in the system, I don't care about getting justice for you more than I care about getting justice for the people that you victimized in order to end up there in the first place. If I got to pick between the two, I'd rather serve the victim than serve the criminal, period. And ridiculously, I don't know why, but ridiculously, the political left has decided to position themselves as the party that's going to be the champion for criminals. And they want to get justice for the criminals, but they don't say anything about the victims, which makes no sense to me. I don't understand why you even want to do that. And Donald Trump has positioned himself as the law and order guy. He's used that phrase many times. He made the claim that's not actually based in logic, but he made the claim he was going to give full immunity to police officers, which is not possible. The president does not have that type of power because the president has federal powers. He does not have state level powers. The police that you go past and deal with every day or see every day, those are state level controls. Those are not federal controls. The president cannot grant immunity to state level cops. The point of the claim that he made, though, was to paint the picture in people's minds that he wants the police to be able to do their jobs without feeling concerned over getting penalized for doing what they're actually supposed to be doing. The priority here, when it comes to criminality, again, the priority should not be the criminal. It should be the victim. Again, the criminal system should treat criminals humanely. I do agree with that. Yes, they should treat them humanely. That doesn't mean that they're the priority. There's a difference between those 2 points. The priority is the victim and or the community who was hurt by the criminal. That's the priority. The victim comes first and the criminal comes last. There are too many people on this political left who somehow want to emphasize criminal justice reform as a way of helping out the criminals. Again, I have no idea why the Democratic Party would ever want to put themselves in this position, but this is what they've chosen to do. And this is bullshit. Why would you want to do this? You want to ignore the people who got victimized, but you want to help out the criminal. Why do that? Why position yourself in such a way? This is especially pernicious in the black community. Let me address the black community at this moment, where we tend to glorify and idolize people who have criminal histories, especially when idolizing that criminal is a way for some black people to feel like they're sticking it to Republicans or conservatives or quote unquote the white man in the United States, or you're sticking it to the government or sticking it to the system or sticking it to Donald Trump. All right, cut that stupid shit out. If you're black listening to this, I'm talking to you. Cut this stupid shit out. I just saw on X, just today when I'm recording this, it was not the day that you're listening to it. I saw Luther Campbell. This is a guy who is a rapper. He was known as Luke, or some people call him Uncle Luke. Luke is probably in his late 50s or 60s these days. And he used to rap back in the day. He had a group called 2 Live Crew. They were very famous. They were famous for having very raunchy lyrics. And Luke posted a photo on X just this afternoon where he said, I want everybody to remember I was the only person who went to jail for hip hop because he had gotten arrested because he was warned, do not perform your lewd lyrics at this stage on this show. And he performed them anyway, knowing that they were threatening him. And then the cops came and arrested him during his show. And he got famously arrested for that. And the reason why, when you look at music these days, you see that little label that says, what does it say? Parental discretion advised for explicit lyrics. That label got created because of Luke. Luke and his crew were the ones who made that label be necessary because they had these lewd lyrics where they would say crazy things on their songs. And I replied to Luke, paraphrasing what I said, that it's ridiculous that he would even post that as if it's some type of credibility piece for him, or that he should be respected or honored in some way just because he got incarcerated. Like, what message are you sending across to the community that, oh, you got arrested? So what does that mean? That means you're supposed to have more respect for you? Does that mean that makes you somebody because you got arrested? And again, in our community, we tend to push this stuff and defend it even. This is nonsense. If you're black, listen to this. I'm talking to you. Cut that bullshit out. We do not honor and look up to people just because they went to jail. Now, why they went to jail is a whole different conversation, but just because someone went to jail doesn't mean they get more respect in the streets or more honor from you just because they got incarcerated. What the hell are you doing? I talked about this in the series where I trashed hip hop, quote unquote, culture. One of the things that I said in there is that we tend to look up to people who get incarcerated as if this is some type of badge of honor. No, it's not. It's a badge of stupidity because not only did you commit a crime, you also got caught. All that said, let's recap today's class. This is part 2 of our ongoing series, Why MAGA is Terrible for America. Number 4, they ignore climate change. They don't want to do anything to stop the changing climate in America. Number 5, weaker relationships with our international allies. Donald Trump is America first, and we're prioritizing America and deprioritizing helping out other countries. And number 6, halted criminal justice reform. And instead of doing more things to help out the criminals, Donald Trump seems to be focused on law and order and helping out the cops. And these 3 reasons, again, I told you why I actually don't even agree with these, but again, that's not my point here today. Not about necessarily what I think, is about why people go against Trump, what they think makes him bad. And these are 3 points that will go on their list. I just gave you my counterpoint to their points. Tomorrow, we got 3 more to tell you why MAGA is terrible for America. Make sure you go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can secure me as your coach, get access to all of our trainings, all of our programs. We got a lot of stuff. If you like the stuff I put out here, imagine what you see inside of our university. That's all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all